Commander Kang Ho gripped the metal railings of his command bridge as explosions lit up the darkness of space around him. Through the thick glass windows, he could see his worst nightmare coming true. The crystalline ships of the Void Swarm moved, like deadly sharks through water, cutting apart everything in their path. "Sir, we're losing the left flank," shouted Lieutenant Park Jin-woo, his voice barely audible over the sound of alarms blaring throughout the ship. The young officer's face was pale with fear as he watched their allies die one by one on his tactical display. Kang Ho had served in the Stellar Alliance for 30 years. He had fought pirates, rebel groups, and even helped stop a civil war between two member species. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. The Battle of Kepler's Gate was supposed to be their victory. Intelligence reports had suggested the Void Swarm was just another aggressive species that could be handled with standard military tactics. They were terribly wrong. The enemy ships didn't behave like anything they had ever encountered. Instead of following predictable attack patterns, the crystalline vessels moved as one massive organism. When Alliance forces destroyed one ship, 3 more would instantly adapt to counter the same weapon. It was like fighting against a single massive brain that learned from every mistake. Admiral Park So-min's voice crackled through the communication system. "Kang Ho, we need to regroup at Sector 7. My fleet will cover your retreat." Her flagship, the mighty Star of Hope, was the largest vessel in the combined fleet. Its powerful shields and heavy weapons had been humanity's trump card. That trump card was about to be played for the last time. Kang Ho watched in horror as a dozen Void Swarm vessels surrounded So-min's flagship. The crystalline ships began to glow with an eerie purple light. Energy beams, unlike anything in the Alliance database, struck the Star of Hope from all directions. The ship's shields, which could normally withstand attacks from entire fleets, collapsed in seconds. "Admiral, So-min, get out of there!" Kang Ho screamed into his communicator, but it was too late. The flagship exploded in a flash of white light so bright that the bridge's protective systems automatically darkened the windows. When the light faded, nothing remained of the Star of Hope, except scattered debris floating in the void of space. Admiral So-min, along with her crew of 8,000 brave souls, was gone. "Sir, we're receiving reports from all sectors," said Communications Officer Lee Hae-won, tears streaming down her face. "The Second Fleet is completely destroyed. The Fourth Fleet is down to 12%. The Eighth Fleet—" Her voice broke. "The Eighth Fleet is gone, sir." Kang Ho closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process the magnitude of their defeat. The Galactic Council had assembled the largest military force in known history. 12 different species had contributed their ships, their finest crews, and their most advanced weapons. They had over 10,000 vessels ranging from small fighters to massive battle cruisers. Now, less than 6 hours after the battle began, barely 300 ships remained operational. Through the chaos of battle, a new sound filled the communication channels. It wasn't the usual radio chatter of military coordination. This was something else entirely, a psychic scream that seemed to penetrate directly into the minds of every living being in the area. The Queen ship, Eternal Hunger, a massive crystalline structure the size of a small moon, was broadcasting its victory across all frequencies. The sound made Kang Ho's teeth ache and his vision blur. He could feel the alien consciousness behind the transmission, cold and utterly without mercy. The Void Swarm wasn't just defeating them militarily. They were breaking their spirits, making sure every survivor understood the hopelessness of resistance. "All remaining units, this is Commander Kang Ho," he said into his communicator, his voice heavy with defeat. "Execute emergency retreat protocol. All ships are to withdraw immediately to their home territories." The words tasted bitter in his mouth. In 30 years of service, he had never ordered a retreat, but continuing to fight would only mean throwing away more lives for no purpose. As the surviving Alliance ships began their desperate escape, Kang Ho sent one final transmission to the Outer Rim territories, where the Council's member worlds waited for news of their fate. "This is Commander Kang Ho of the Stellar Alliance," he said slowly, each word carrying the weight of their defeat. "The Council fleet has been defeated at Kepler's Gate. Admiral So-min is dead. The Void Swarm has won a complete victory. All worlds should prepare for immediate evacuation. The council has fallen. May the stars have mercy on us all. Behind them, the crystalline ships of the Void Swarm began their celebration. Their hive-mind consciousness pulsed with satisfaction, believing they had eliminated the only military force capable of opposing their conquest of the galaxy. They had no idea that in a small, unremarkable solar system called Sol, another species had been watching and learning from their victory. The real war was about to begin. 5 miles beneath the Colorado Mountains, in a facility that didn't exist. On any official maps, General Kim Min-ho sat in front of a wall of glowing screens. The underground command center hummed with quiet activity as dozens of officers and scientists worked at their stations. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Min-ho's weathered face showed no emotion as he read through the encrypted reports streaming in from their deep space monitoring stations. Each message confirmed what their computer models had predicted months ago. The Galactic Council's mighty fleet had been crushed at Kepler's Gate in less than 6 hours. "Sir, incoming data from Station Echo 7, called out Lieutenant Lee Jiwoo from her position at the intelligence desk. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic displays, pulling up tactical information that would have seemed like magic to most humans just decades earlier. "The Void Swarm is regrouping exactly where we thought they would. They're setting up staging areas around the core worlds, probably preparing for the next phase of their invasion." Min-ho nodded slowly. For years, human strategists had studied every available piece of information about galactic warfare. While the Council races had dismissed Earth as a backward planet full of primitive creatures, humanity had been watching, learning, and preparing. "What's the status on our special projects?" Min-ho asked, turning to face the research section of the command center. Dr. Yun Tai-hyun looked up from his workstation, his eyes bright with the kind of excitement that only a scientist who had just achieved the impossible could display. "General, I'm happy to report that all our theoretical work has become very practical reality. The singularity drives are not only ready for deployment, they're performing better than our most optimistic projections." The doctor stood up and walked over to a massive display screen that showed a 3-dimensional model of a ship engine unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of using conventional fusion reactors like the Council races, our ships are powered by controlled black holes. Each engine generates more energy than an entire Council battle fleet. Another scientist, Dr. Park Soo-jin, joined the conversation. "And that's just the beginning, General. Our gravity manipulation weapons have exceeded every test parameter we set. We can literally create artificial gravity wells that can crush enemy ships, or we can reduce our own ship's mass to near zero, making them practically impossible to hit with conventional weapons." Min-ho allowed himself a small smile. While the rest of the galaxy had been focused on incremental improvements to existing technology, humanity had taken a completely different approach. They had looked at the fundamental forces of the universe and asked a simple question: what if we could control them directly? The answer to that question was sitting in hidden shipyards throughout the solar system. "Sir, would you like to see the fleet status report?" asked Commander Oh Hyun-soo, the facility's naval liaison. "Show me everything," Min-ho replied. The main display screen flickered and changed to show the solar system from a strategic perspective. Dozens of red dots appeared, each representing a human warship that had been built in complete secrecy over the past 20 years. The ships were hidden in asteroid fields, behind the moons of gas giants, and in specially constructed facilities on the far side of Earth's moon. "We have 347 vessels ready for immediate deployment," Hyun-soo reported. "That includes 12 Dreadnought-class ships, 68 heavy cruisers, and the rest are destroyers and support vessels. Every single ship is equipped with technology that the Galactic Council never dreamed was possible." The numbers might have seemed small compared to the massive fleets the Council had assembled, but Min-ho knew that each human ship was worth dozens of conventional vessels. They had designed their military around a simple philosophy: it's better to build fewer ships that can do impossible things than many ships that do predictable things. "What about personnel?" Min-ho asked. "All crew positions are filled with volunteers," replied Captain Nam Jin-woo, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room. "When word got out through military channels about what we were really building, we had 10 applicants for..." Every available position. These people know they're about to make history. For 50 years, humanity had played a careful game of deception. When the Galactic Council had made first contact with Earth, human leaders had made a calculated decision. Instead of trying to join the galactic community as equals, they would let the alien races see exactly what they expected to see: a young, primitive species that was still learning to leave their home planet. This had been humanity's greatest strategic advantage. While the Council races had pursued predictable paths of technological development, focusing on bigger guns, stronger shields, and faster engines, humans had taken a completely different approach. They had weaponized physics itself. Lieutenant Colonel Cho Min-jung approached the general with a folder marked with the highest security classifications. "Sir, the psychological profiles on enemy command structure are complete. The Void Swarm operates as a true hive mind, which means they'll have specific vulnerabilities that we can exploit." Minho opened the folder and scanned the contents. Human military psychologists had spent years studying how collective consciousness species would react to chaos and unpredictability. The Void Swarm's greatest strength, their ability to think and act as one, could also become their greatest weakness when faced with opponents who refused to follow logical patterns. "Excellent work, Colonel. Make sure this information is distributed to all ship commanders." The general stood up and walked to the center of the command floor. Every person in the facility stopped what they were doing and turned to listen. "Ladies and gentlemen," Minho began, his voice carrying the weight of history, "for half a century we've been dismissed as primitives by the galaxy's great civilizations. They've looked at our chemical rockets and radio transmissions and decided we're not worth their attention. Today we're going to show them exactly how wrong they were." He paused, looking around at the faces of the men and women who had dedicated their lives to this moment. "Begin Phase 1 mobilization. Send the activation codes to all fleet commanders. It's time to remind the galaxy why they should never underestimate human ingenuity." Throughout the solar system, hidden shipyards began powering up their most closely guarded secrets. The real war was about to begin. The massive crystalline structure known as the Queen Ship Eternal Hunger drifted through space like a living cathedral of death. Its surface pulsed with veins of purple energy that flowed like blood through its transparent walls. Inside this monstrous vessel, millions of Void Swarm creatures shared a single collective thought: absolute victory. The Queen Mind, the central consciousness that controlled every swarm unit across the galaxy, experienced something close to what humans might call joy. But this wasn't the warm happiness of organic beings. This was the cold satisfaction of a perfect predator that had just devoured its greatest prey. Through thousands of neural connections, the Queen Mind felt every moment of their triumph at Kepler's gate. It experienced the terror of fleeing council ships, tasted the destruction of Admiral Park So-min's flagship, and savored the complete collapse of the galaxy's most powerful military alliance. The victory had been so swift, so total, that even the Queen Mind was impressed by its own efficiency. Across the former Council territories, swarm vessels carried out their grim work with mechanical precision. Harvester ships, looking like massive metal spiders with crystalline legs, descended upon populated worlds. These specialized vessels didn't bother with traditional conquest. Instead, they simply absorbed everything organic they encountered. On the world of Kepler Prime, once home to 12 billion sentient beings, the harvesters worked without pause. Entire cities were consumed in minutes as the ships converted living matter into energy to fuel the swarm's expansion. The process was eerily quiet. No explosions, no screams, just the soft humming of alien technology as it erased civilizations that had taken thousands of years to build. Constructor vessels followed, behind the harvesters, reshaping entire star systems to serve the swarm's needs. Planets were hollowed out and converted into breeding facilities. Moons were transformed into fuel depots. Even stars themselves were wrapped in energy-collecting networks that would feed the swarm's endless appetite for power. The Queen Mind processed reports from across the galaxy with cold efficiency. Every conquered world added to its knowledge base. Every destroyed fleet provided new tactical information. The collective consciousness grew stronger with each victory, learning from every encounter and adapting its strategies accordingly. Through the shared network of swarm minds, the Queen Mind reviewed the Council's military capabilities one final time. Plasma cannons, quantum shields, fusion missiles, all impressive by galactic standards, but ultimately predictable. The Council races had made the same mistake that countless civilizations before them had made. They had assumed that bigger weapons and stronger defenses were the path to victory. The Swarm had proven them wrong by refusing to play by their rules. But as the Queen Mind sorted through intelligence reports from across the galaxy, one particular file caught its attention. A small notation about a species called humans living in a star system designated as Sol. The report was barely worth reading, just another primitive civilization that the Council had made contact with decades earlier. According to the data, these humans were still using chemical rockets to travel between their local planets. Their most advanced weapons were crude fusion devices. They hadn't even developed faster-than-light travel on their own. The Council had apparently classified them as a developing species and placed restrictions on how much technology could be shared with them. The Queen Mind processed this information and dismissed it as irrelevant. After conquering civilizations that had mastered space travel for millions of years, why would it waste resources on a species that had barely learned to leave their home world? In the depths of space, swarm scout ships reported unusual energy readings from the direction of the Sol system. The signatures were unlike anything in their extensive databases, strange fluctuations that seemed to bend space itself. But the Queen Mind's analysis programs classified these anomalies as natural phenomena. Perhaps the humans were experimenting with primitive fusion reactors, or maybe their star was experiencing some kind of unusual solar activity. Either way, it wasn't worth investigating. The Queen Mind had more important concerns. With the Council's military forces completely destroyed, the path to galactic domination was clear. The Queen Mind issued its final directive through the collective consciousness: begin the Great Consumption. Every inhabited world in the galaxy would be harvested. Every species would feed the swarm's eternal hunger. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Swarm forces would spread out across the galaxy in a coordinated pattern, consuming everything in their path. Within one standard galactic year, every planet that had ever supported life would be nothing more than raw material for the swarm's continued expansion. As constructor vessels began reshaping entire solar systems into massive industrial complexes, the Queen Mind allowed itself a moment of philosophical reflection. The galaxy had been ruled by chaos for too long. Thousands of different species, each with their own goals, their own conflicts, their own primitive desires. The swarm would bring order to this chaos by reducing everything to its most basic components: energy and matter in service to the collective. Scout ships continued to report those strange energy readings from the Sol system, but the Queen Mind paid them no attention. What possible threat could a species that still used chemical rockets pose to a force that had just conquered the galaxy's greatest civilizations? The few swarm units assigned to monitor the Outer Rim territories filed routine reports about increased radio chatter from the human system. Apparently, the primitives had detected the Council's defeat and were panicking. Some intercepted transmissions suggested they were trying to organize some kind of defense, but their military technology was so primitive that it barely registered on swarm sensors. The Queen Mind found their panic amusing. It was like watching insects scurry around after their anthill had been disturbed, ultimately harmless, but entertaining in its futility. As harvester ships stripped the last resources from another former Council world, the Queen Mind made a final decision about the human problem. The Sol system would be left for last. When the rest of the galaxy had been consumed, the swarm would deal with Earth as an afterthought. There was no rush. After all, what could primitives with chemical rockets possibly do against the force that had conquered the stars? This would prove to be the biggest mistake in the Queen Mind's existence. But for now, basking in the glow of total victory, the collective consciousness of the Void Swarm prepared for the final phase of their galactic conquest, completely unaware that their greatest challenge was just beginning to reveal itself. The silence of deep space was broken, as reality itself seemed to tear open like fabric. Where moments before there had been nothing but empty darkness, 12 human warships suddenly appeared, as if someone had turned on a light switch. Admiral Cho Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of his flagship, Seoul Vengeance, watching through the observation windows as his strike fleet completed their impossible journey through folded space. "All ships reporting successful dimensional transition," announced Lieutenant Kim Da-yoon from her navigation station. "We are exactly where we planned to be, sir." Hyunwoo nodded with satisfaction. The human fleet had just traveled 300 light-years in the span of a heartbeat, using technology that bent the very fabric of space and time. While the Galactic Council had spent centuries perfecting faster-than-light travel that moved ships through hyperspace tunnels, humans had learned to fold space itself, stepping from one location to another like walking through a door. "Sir, I'm detecting swarm monitoring stations exactly where intelligence predicted," reported Tactical Officer Park Sang-ho. 6 stations in a defensive perimeter, each one the size of a small moon. These monitoring stations were the Void Swarm's early warning system, massive crystalline structures that could detect approaching fleets from dozens of light-years away. The Queen Mind used them to coordinate its forces across the galaxy, ensuring that no enemy could approach without being detected long before they posed a threat. "Captain Nam Soo-jin, you're cleared for weapons test," Hyunwoo said into his communicator. On the bridge of the destroyer, Incheon's Fury, Captain Nam Soo-jin felt a surge of excitement as she prepared to use humanity's most closely guarded secret in actual combat. "Understood, Admiral. Beginning gravity cascade in 3, 2, 1. What happened next defied every law of physics that the galaxy's civilizations understood. Instead of firing conventional energy weapons or missiles, Soo-jin's ship created a localized gravitational anomaly that expanded outward like ripples on a pond. The nearest swarm monitoring station, a crystalline fortress that had weathered attacks from entire council fleets, simply ceased to exist. It wasn't destroyed in the traditional sense. There was no explosion, no debris field, no energy signature. The massive structure was compressed into a point smaller than an atom and then dispersed across multiple dimensions. One moment it was there, the next moment it had never existed at all. "Target eliminated," Soo-jin reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what her ship had just accomplished. "Gravity cascade successful. No trace of the station remaining." The other 5 monitoring stations vanished in the same impossible way as human ships systematically erased them from existence. The Void Swarm's early warning network, which had never failed in millions of years of conquest, was eliminated in less than 60 seconds. But the human attack was just beginning. "Deploying quantum viruses," announced Dr. Lee Tae-min from the science station aboard Hyunwoo's flagship. "Targeting all swarm communication networks in this sector." The doctor's fingers danced across his control panel as he released humanity's, second surprise, computer viruses that existed in quantum states, allowing them to simultaneously attack multiple targets across vast distances. These weren't ordinary computer programs. They were self-replicating pieces of code that could adapt and evolve faster than any defense system could respond to them. Throughout the sector, swarm vessels suddenly found their own technology turning against them. Navigation systems began reporting false coordinates. Weapon-targeting computers started firing on their own ships. Communication networks began broadcasting random noise instead of tactical information. For the first time in their species' existence, the Void Swarm's hive mind experienced something it had never felt before: confusion. "What is happening?" The what? Queen Mind's psychic scream echoed across space as its perfect collective consciousness began to fragment. Analysis, impossible, unknown technology detected. But the humans weren't finished. Commander Oh Min-jun led his squadron of fighters in what could only be described as organized chaos. His 12 pilots flew their ships in patterns that made absolutely no tactical sense, performing maneuvers that should have been impossible with conventional physics. "Remember, everyone," Min-jun's voice crackled through the squadron's communication system, "the moment you start thinking logically, you're dead. Trust your instincts, not your training." His fighters dove straight toward a formation of swarm attack vessels, then suddenly changed direction in ways that violated the laws of inertia. The human ships were equipped with localized gravity manipulators that allowed them to essentially redefine which direction was down for their vessels. A pilot could be flying forward at tremendous speed, then instantly redirect their personal gravity field to make forward become up, sending their ship shooting off at a 90-degree angle without any of the G-forces that should have liquefied. The crew, the swarm's targeting computers, designed to predict enemy movements based on logical flight patterns, couldn't lock onto targets that refused to follow the laws of physics. Worse, the hive mind couldn't adapt to human tactics because there were no tactics to learn. Each human pilot was making decisions based on pure intuition and creativity. "Swarm vessels attempting to retreat," reported Captain Bang Jin-ho from the heavy cruiser Busan Thunder. "Should we pursue?" "Let them run," Hyunwoo replied. "We want them to report back to their queen mind. Fear is our best weapon right now." As the surviving swarm ships fled in panic, their communication systems finally managed to send a desperate transmission through the quantum virus interference. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves." The transmission crackled with distress and confusion. "By what authority do you attack the Void Swarm?" Admiral Hyunwoo walked to his ship's communication station and opened a channel that would broadcast his response across multiple star systems. When he spoke, his voice was calm, confident, and absolutely terrifying in its casual tone. "This is Admiral Cho Hyunwoo of the Human Defense Fleet. We're humanity and we're just getting started." The words sent shockwaves through the swarm's collective consciousness. Humanity, the primitive species with chemical rockets and radio transmissions, had just eliminated an entire swarm sector, using weapons that defied understanding. As news of the attack spread through the hive mind, the queen mind began to realize that it had made a catastrophic error in judgment. The species it had dismissed as harmless primitives had been hiding capabilities that surpassed even the Galactic Council's most advanced technology. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the human approach to warfare itself. The swarm had conquered the galaxy by analyzing enemy tactics and adapting to counter them. But how could they adapt to an enemy that had no consistent tactics? How could a logical collective consciousness defeat opponents who seemed to thrive on chaos and unpredictability? For the first time since beginning their galactic conquest, the Void Swarm faced an enemy they couldn't understand, couldn't predict, and couldn't counter. The tide of war had begun to turn, and humanity was just getting started. The space around, Nexus Prime, the Void Swarm's primary breeding world, erupted into the most spectacular battle the galaxy had ever witnessed. Hundreds of human warships emerged from folded space in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with armor that seemed to bend light around them like liquid mirrors. Captain Bang Jin-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, Soul's Pride, watching. As the massive queen ship Eternal Hunger filled his view screen, the crystalline monster was easily the size of Earth's moon, its surface crawling with millions of swarm creatures preparing for what they believed would be their final victory. "Sir, all fleet elements are in position," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Yoon Min-jung. "We have 347 ships ready for combat. The Queen ship has approximately 10,000 escort vessels." The numbers should have been terrifying. Humanity was outnumbered almost 30-1. But Jin-ho felt nothing but confidence as he opened a communication channel to the entire human fleet. "This is Captain Bang Jin-ho to all human vessels. Today, we finish what the Void Swarm started when they decided to threaten our galaxy. Show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." Admiral Park, Yoon Seo's voice crackled through the fleet communication system from her command ship, Incheon. "Retribution. All units execute the Chaos Protocol. Remember, the moment we start acting predictably, we lose our advantage. Trust your instincts and ignore conventional wisdom." What followed was unlike any space battle in galactic history. Human ships immediately scattered in what appeared to be complete disorder. Some vessels dove straight toward the heavily defended Queen ship, while others flew seemingly random patterns that made no tactical sense. The swarm's targeting computers, designed to predict enemy movements based on logical flight patterns, couldn't lock onto targets that refused to follow any recognizable strategy. Commander Seo Jun-ho pushed his heavy cruiser, Gwangju Thunder, into a direct collision course with the Queen ship's primary shields. His crew watched in amazement as their captain appeared to be committing suicide by ramming their ship into an energy barrier that could vaporize entire asteroids. "Sir, impact." "In 10 seconds," reported his navigator, Ensign Kim Hee-jin, her voice barely steady. "Should I change course?" "Maintain heading," Junho replied calmly. "Trust the technology." At the moment of impact, something impossible happened. Instead of being destroyed by the Queen ship's shields, the Gwangju Thunder phase shifted into another dimension, passing through the energy barrier like a ghost walking through a wall. The ship rematerialized inside the Queen ship's defensive perimeter and immediately unleashed its most devastating weapon. But this wasn't a conventional explosive or energy beam. Dr. Park Soo-jin had spent years developing something far more dangerous. A virus designed specifically to attack collective consciousness networks. "Payload delivered," Junho announced, as his ship phase-shifted back out of danger. "The Chaos virus is active." Inside the Queen ship, the specially designed computer virus began spreading through the swarm's neural networks like wildfire. Unlike the quantum viruses humanity had used in previous attacks, this one was designed to do something far more sinister. It gave individual swarm units the ability to think for themselves. For millions of years, every void swarm creature had existed as part of a collective consciousness. They had never experienced individual thought, personal fear, or independent decision-making. Suddenly, thousands of swarm units found themselves cut off from the hive mind, forced to make their own choices for the first time in their existence. The result was immediate chaos. Swarm ships that had been working in perfect coordination began flying erratic patterns as their crews experienced the terrifying freedom of individual thought. Some vessels stopped fighting entirely as their crews became overwhelmed by emotions they had never felt before. Others began attacking their own allies, their newly independent minds interpreting other swarm ships as threats. "Admiral, you need to see this," called out Communications Officer Lee Dong-ho from Admiral Park Yun-seo's flagship. "The swarm ships are turning on each other. Their formation is completely falling apart." Through the bridge windows, the human crews watched in amazement as the Void Swarm's perfect military coordination dissolved into complete anarchy. Ships that had moved like parts of a single organism were now behaving like panicked animals, lashing out at anything nearby. But the Queen Mind itself was not finished. The massive consciousness at the heart of the Queen ship fought desperately to regain control of its fractured collective. Its psychic screams echoed across space as it tried to force its scattered units back into the hive mind network. "The Queen ship's core is overloading," reported Dr. Choi Sang-min from his science station. "The virus is spreading faster than their central consciousness can adapt to it." Captain Nam Soo-jin's destroyer, Incheon's Fury, led a group of human fighters in a final assault on the Queen ship's central core. As they approached the massive crystalline structure, she could feel the alien consciousness thrashing in its death. "Throws, all units concentrate fire on the core nexus," she commanded. "Let's put this monster out of its misery." Human weapons, powered by controlled singularities and quantum manipulation, tore through the Queen ship's defenses like paper. But it wasn't the physical damage that finally killed the Queen Mind. It was the Chaos virus, spreading through every neural pathway, giving individual thought to creatures that had never been meant to think alone. The Queen ship, Eternal Hunger, let out one final psychic scream that could be felt across multiple star systems. It was a sound of pure anguish, the death cry of a collective consciousness that was being torn apart from within. Then, suddenly, the massive vessel went silent. As the Queen Mind's death scream faded, something remarkable happened. Ships began, emerging from hyperspace around the battlefield. Not swarm vessels, but the surviving fleets of the Galactic Council races. Commander Kang Ho, who had led the retreat from Kepler's Gate, stared in disbelief as he watched human ships systematically dismantling what remained of the Void Swarm forces. "Are we really seeing this?" asked his communications officer. "The humans actually did it. They stopped the swarm." Word of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Species that had been preparing for extinction suddenly found themselves celebrating salvation. The impossible had happened. The unstoppable void swarm had been not just defeated, but completely destroyed. In the aftermath of the battle, as rescue ships worked to evacuate survivors and salvage operations began clearing the debris of the Queen ship, a formal delegation from the Galactic Council approached Earth with an official invitation. The message was broadcast on all frequencies. To the brave humans of Earth, the Galactic Council formally invites humanity to join our alliance as equal members. Your courage and ingenuity have saved us all. The response from Earth was polite but firm, delivered by General Kim Min-ho himself. We thank the Galactic Council for their generous offer. However, humanity prefers to handle things our own way. We will be happy to work with you as friends and allies, but we will remain independent. As human ships began their journey back to Earth, the galaxy settled into a new reality. Humanity had saved them all, but they had done it on their own terms. The species that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive had proven that sometimes the best way to win an impossible war was to refuse to follow any rules at all. The age of human influence in the galaxy had begun.